Here's something to think about. What exactly would happen if one person were able to get 2 of the Maiden powers? Would their body actually be able to withstand that much magic? If they could, what would their power be double that of a normal Maiden's? What would happen when they died? Would their power just transfer to the next person and they get both of the Maiden powers? Or would the 2 separate Maiden powers stay separate within their body and somehow transfer to 2 separate people? There's a lot we don't know about magic, and a lot that's going to have to be explained later on in the RWBY universe. In the RWBY series, I should say. And with all the magic coming from one place, at least that we know of so far, that place being Ozpin, since he gave all the Maidens their powers, if 2 Maidens' powers, for example, let's just say the Fall and Spring Maidens' powers, if they were to go back to the same place, then I believe that they would likely combine and there would no longer be 2 separate Maidens. So, when they died, those powers would then follow the same rules that Ozpin set up when he gave the magic out to the Maidens. That it would transfer to the next person that they were thinking of, as long as it was a young woman. Otherwise, it would transfer to someone random. Now, if it did transfer to someone random, it doesn't have to necessarily transfer to one person. That meaning that, I guess, the powers could separate again and transfer to 2 other people. But that seems unlikely, because this is not something Ozpin accounted for when he gave out the powers. He intended the powers to be separated into 4 separate people. That's why there's never been an instance of a Maiden or one person having 2 Maidens' powers. As Crow said, there's always been 4 Maidens. There's never been less, so he's definitely set up some way to keep the powers separate. And the reason I think that Ozpin intended it this way, as I explained in my last video, is because the initial 4 Maidens were sisters, and ideally, or in theory, when one of them died, they'd think of one of their sisters, because they were fairly close from what we know, and the powers would then transfer them, one person would have 2 powers, etc., etc. So, Ozpin put in some way to keep all the powers separate. And if one person were to get 2 powers, I believe a lot of his rules that he implemented into this magical power would be void at that point, because it's out of the realm of possibilities that he accounted for. Granted, this is Ozpin, so he may have accounted for a lot more. Though, I don't think his planning is as wide-reaching as he'd like us all to believe, because I don't think he accounted for Cinder showing up and killing him at Beacon. But you never know. He might have some grand plan that we don't know of, but again, that's a topic for another video. So the possibility of one person getting 2 Maiden powers and what would actually happen to them is pretty much up in the air. We don't exactly know what would happen with that. Now, one thing we will have to deal with within this series is what happened at the end of Volume 5. Whether Cinder's dead or not, she took a little bit of Raven's power. She has a little bit of the Spring Maiden's power. Now, as we saw at the end of Volume 3, when Amber died, I'm just going to say half of the power. We don't exactly know how much the power was split. It could have been 60-40, 50-50, whatever. I'm just going to consider it as half the power was in Amber, half the power was in Cinder. When Cinder killed Amber, the power reunited itself. That could have been because Amber was thinking about Cinder in her moment of death, the moment before going into a coma, etc., etc. But the way it's implied is that the power wanted to be whole, so it all went to Cinder. Now, if Cinder stole some of Raven's power, if Cinder did die at the end of Volume 5, then the Spring Maiden's power is going to go back to Raven. Would it drag the Fall Maiden's power with it? I'd probably think that it would. As I mentioned before, because all the magic power came from the same source, it all initially was the same power to begin with, I believe that the magic power would just combine. Especially since the magic is of the same category. Like, they're both elemental magic powers. They can both use ice, they can both use fire, etc., etc., and it's different than, I'd say, Raven's transformation magic being able to transform into birds. I don't think that Raven's transformation magic would go along with the Maiden magic, but again, we don't know enough about magic, so I'm just going to consider the Maiden powers for now. So if Cinder died, the spring magic that she took would go back to Raven, and the Fall Maiden's power, I guess, could go to the last person she was thinking of. I made a video considering who would be the next Fall Maiden if Cinder were to die, but I didn't take into the account that Cinder had some of the Spring Maiden's power. So assuming that the power transferred off-screen if Cinder did die, then Raven is now already the Spring and Fall Maiden, something out of the realm of possibilities that we have already considered. Whether Cinder died or not at the end of Volume 5, this is something that we are going to have to deal with at some point in the series, because I personally believe that it's doubtful that both Raven and Cinder are going to survive until the end of the series, just because of the powers that they have and the targets that they have on their back, as well as Cinder's mild psychotic behavior and focus on RWBY, self-sacrificing, and going away from Salem's plans. She's putting herself in a bunch of situations where if she's not dead already, she's probably going to be at some point, especially considering she's already got part of her as Grimm already. I kind of feel that that's the route it's going. So, if Raven is to die before Cinder, the Spring Maiden's powers are probably going to transfer to Cinder. And if Cinder has died, or will die in the future, her powers are going to transfer to Raven, and we will actually find out what is going to happen when one person has two Maiden powers. Now, if both of them were to die at the same instant, what would happen to those powers? Because Cinder has the Spring and Fall Maiden's powers, or a little bit of Spring Maiden's powers, and then Raven has a majority of the Spring Maiden's powers. If they died at the exact same instant, what would happen? Because it's very likely that they would be thinking of different people. For instance, Raven would probably be thinking of Yang, her daughter, likely, and Cinder would be thinking of RWBY. But with Cinder having all of one Maiden's powers and a portion of another, how would that all work? Would the powers just go to their respective owners? No, because the Spring Maiden's power would be still separate. Now, it could be that since it's only a small portion of the Spring Maiden's powers, it could just rejoin the rest of it. The Spring Maiden's powers transfer to one person, the Fall Maiden's powers transfer to another, but that just... I mean, it could happen, but I think that would just be a little bit of almost weak writing. They wrote in that Cinder would take a portion of the Spring Maiden's powers. That was done for a reason. And something is going to come of that. If Cinder's dead already, there's something's going to come of it. Or if something's going to come of it in the future. There's a reason that was put in, a reason why it was so focused on, and a reason why I'm talking about it now. Like, something's going to have to come of it. And it's something I hadn't really considered before, but what do you guys think? I would like to know what other people's opinion on this is, how this is going to play out, and if either Raven or Cinder is going to end up with two Maiden's powers, or if they both end up dead, who is going to end up with two Maiden's powers? I kind of feel that by the end of the series, magic might be eradicated in general, but again, that's probably another topic for another video. So, let me know what you guys think. I'm really looking forward to discussing with some people down in the comments as to what potential this could actually have for the RWBY series, and what it would actually mean person to person, how this power will transfer, and what exactly will happen. So, make sure to subscribe if you like this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.